Good afternoon, students. Today we're going to be talking about Eros, who is a god, and also erotic magic, or magic that creates Eros. Eros, in this sense, is not like we would use it in the sense of the term erotic, which we would think of being sexy or fancifully sexy. Eros is an uncontrollable, miserable affliction that can be brought up, that is caused by gods, is caused by your own ridiculousness and being human, or is inflicted upon you by a sorcerer. All right, so let's get right into it. I have a few observations I want to make about studying magic in general and the use of your imagination. So what we're doing when we're studying magic and we're studying magic rituals, maybe when we study rituals in general, is we're actively engaging our imaginations. We look to the details at the rites, then we imagine the rites, and then we draw conclusions from the rites. Imagination is really the key here, and it's easy to imagine something sort of visually, to visualize it, to think of the visual imagination, but you also need to use your other senses. Imagine the sounds, the touch, the taste, the feel on your skin, the smells of the ritual. So in your brain, you should sort of map out the ritual space, like map out, like if it's a circle, draw the circle, like imagine where it is, by a tree, it's in the middle of nowhere, it's in an old church, wherever. So you imagine and map out that ritual space, the markings on the ground and whatever. Then I want you to imagine sort of the people, or just the operator. Is it the operator sorcerer doing the magic rite, or does he have clients there? Does he have other people that are involved in the rituals? Then imagine all of the ingredients sort of laid out before you and kind of visualize them. Imagine what they look like. Imagine what they smell like. Imagine what they look like. Then I want you to sort of imagine the sounds of mantras and liturgies and statements in the ritual. Sometimes these are called voces magicae, which refers to magical languages or magical language that can be pronounced. It is possible to be pronounced, but it is sort of semantically gibberish. It doesn't have a lot of meaning. Then you should sort of imagine the operator, or even imagine yourself as the operator, performing all of the actions that are prescribed for the ritual and imagine the touch, the taste, the smell, and the sound there. So then you imagine finally concluding the ritual. But in this point, really put yourself in the position of the ritualist. What do you feel after the ritual is over? Accomplishment, anxiety, exhaustion, shame? What do you feel? What would the operator feel as the ritual concludes? This last little bit about what do you feel at the end should also be extended to the psychological and emotional states for the operator throughout the rite. In this way, we're having empathy for the operators and the clients. We're empathically thinking. We're thinking about what their feelings would be like. Empathy is more than just putting yourself in someone's shoes, but it's trying to realize the inner states and the inner emotions of other people. So in this way, I would argue when we're reading these magic rituals and imagining them, we're doing a sort of historical field work, almost a historical anthropology, but instead of going and hanging around with a group of people and studying them, our data is our reading and our imagination. So we generate a sort of thick description using imagination. Now, thick description is a concept by Clifford Geertz, who talked about it in 1973 in his classic article, Thick Description, Toward an Interpretive Theory of Culture. And thick description, an ethnographer, one who is studying cultures and ethnicities, if anything you want to use there in the widest sense of the term, the ethnographer is sort of becoming embedded in a culture and tries to understand it. Now, there are four aspects of a thick description. One, it is an interpretive study. What you're doing in thick description is it interprets the manner in which meaning is ascribed. So you don't just rawly describe everything that happens, but you're making some sense of interpretations and speculations and trying to note as much as you can about the situation as you're experiencing it. So imagine you are witnessing a cultural event and you're trying to make note of everything that happens. Now, the subject of an ethnography and its interpretation is the flow of social discourse. So as you're looking at what's going on, if you're looking at your data as it's happening, You're establishing and trying to unveil the sort of codes and the social codes that are required to understand these social events. You're trying to look at the fullest social context as possible. Also, your interpretation in a thick description should deal with extrovert expressions. What we mean by this is you're listening to what people say, to people who are telling you things. Your interpretation is based on data. You're describing the culture based on what is told to you by those within the culture who you're reporting upon. Finally, ethnographic description is microscopic, not macroscopic, microscopic. It uses local, context-specific interactions and phenomena. It does not generalize. So when you're thinking through these rituals, imagine you're a participant and try to figure out the social conditions there, the ways people are interacting, what's going on, why it's going on. So thinking through these rituals is almost like being a participant observer, which in ethnography means that the ethnographer is performing and acting in the culture while also recording the culture and her own experiences in the culture. So if I was a participant observer in a Catholic Mass, I would be standing, I would be sitting, I'd be looking to the priest, I'd be singing, I'd go up for communion. I'd do all of those things and try as a participant and an observer. So as a participant observer in your mind, you should imagine yourself as if you are the client of one of these sorcerers or you are the sorcerer yourself. Okay, to go a little bit further, there's an idea that I quite like in religious studies called prescriptive imagination. So in prescriptive imagination, authors imagine rites and rituals and they write them down without ever doing them. They're not recording rituals that they've actually done. They're engaging in prescriptive imagination. Their imagination allows them to work out the details of a ritual and write them down without actually doing them. They're imaginative. Now here, the imagined rite, here the author would imagine the rite and prescribes it. Also, when you're thinking about how an author might be using the prescriptive imagination, you'd have to think that when they're writing that ritual, they're still engaging all the principles and building blocks of other rites as they're making this imagined rite. And I mean, I would even argue, especially when you're reading like a lot of these neo-pagan books that come out right now, and I know a number of neo-pagan authors, and I often ask after they've written all these elaborate rituals, I'm like, have you done any of these? And they always say, oh yeah. I don't get a sense that they've done a lot of them. So when you see a ritual written down, do not assume that the author's actually done them. Have some doubts as to whether the authors have actually done them, in fact. Okay, so to go even a little step further, especially in Tantra, the type of Hinduism I study, rituals are often visualized by the practitioners, and the rituals are internalized. So one later phase of Tantra says, instead of doing sort of aggressive magic rituals, you just visualize them. That way your body isn't made impure by touching like feces or corpses or wine or something like that. You can do it all internally. So in this way, imagination creates a space where you can observe the rituals and interpret the rituals by visualizing them yourself. Imagination is your greatest tool in studying magic and in studying rituals and in studying magic rituals. So just because you can't see someone observing a ritual doesn't mean you can't have some interpretations of it and you can't think it through using your imagination, but your imagination has to be pretty vivid. But with practice, you'll get there. What do? I sit around all day and I read rituals in funny languages and try to observe them in my own head.